Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Have you ever sat across from someone you love, someone you've built a world with, shared holidays, inside jokes, soft Sunday mornings, and suddenly, something about the way they speak feels off, not dramatic, not scandalous, just off. A phrase you've heard 100 times suddenly lands differently. You feel it before you understand it. That quiet, intuitive ache in your chest that whispers, something isn't right. This isn't about paranoia, it's about awareness. When trust begins to erode, it doesn't always scream, it whispers. And sometimes, the words we think are harmless are actually carrying the weight of emotional distance, secrecy, and yes, betrayal. Today we're going to talk about those subtle, almost invisible phrases that women say when they're emotionally elsewhere, when they're beginning to slip into someone else's orbit. These aren't the obvious confessions or dramatic blow-ups. These are the quiet, hidden phrases, like emotional fingerprints left behind by infidelity. Not because women are cruel, but because sometimes they're lost, disconnected, searching. And if you can learn to hear beneath the surface, you can see what's really going on before it's too late. So take a deep breath, stay open, and let's begin a conversation most people are too afraid to have, but one that could change everything. Relationships, real relationships, aren't built on romance alone. They're forged in silence, in glances across the room, in the stories we tell and the ones we choose not to. They live and breathe in the little things, the habits, the rituals, the phrases we repeat without thinking. And sometimes, it's those very things that carry the earliest signs of fracture. Let's start here. Imagine you're with someone you love. Maybe you've been together for years. You've navigated the messiness of real life, mortgages, children, business ventures, aging parents, dreams that didn't pan out. You've built something, and even though it's not perfect, it's familiar. It's home, but lately you feel her slipping. Not physically, she's still beside you at dinner. She still kisses you goodnight. But emotionally, she's quieter, or she's suddenly louder, unexpectedly defensive. There's an emotional temperature shift, but you can't quite explain it. You wonder if you're imagining things. You blame work, stress, hormones, maybe even yourself. But then she says something, a phrase that doesn't belong, that tastes strange in her mouth, like it came from someone else's story. And in that moment, your body knows before your mind does. Let's talk about the first hidden phrase, not just the words, but what lies beneath them. You're overreacting. Now, on the surface, it sounds innocent, maybe even reasonable. Maybe you were a little too sharp. Maybe you asked too many questions. But I want you to pause here, really feel into what's happening beneath that sentence. When a woman says, you're overreacting, especially in a tone that feels dismissive or flat, what she's often doing is protecting a secret by making you question your instincts. She's rewriting your emotional reality in real time, not always consciously, but still it's a kind of gaslighting. It may come when you casually ask, who were you texting just now? Or, why did you stay out so late? Maybe you noticed a sudden change in routine. She used to tell you everything about her day, and now her answers are vague, scattered. You pick up on the shift, and you ask a question, and instead of clarity, you're met with, you're overreacting. But let's be honest, you know her. You know her rhythms. You've listened to her laugh in her sleep. You've rubbed her back when she cried over her father. You've watched her light up when she talks about her dreams. So when something changes, you feel it? And being told that what you feel is invalid, that's not love, that's evasion. This phrase isn't always a declaration of betrayal, but it often signals emotional distance. And when that emotional distance is paired with secrecy, it becomes dangerous. Because what often happens next is a man begins to doubt himself. He stops asking questions. He tells himself he's being controlling or jealous. He apologizes for being tuned in. And in doing so, he gives up the one tool that could have helped him see clearly, his intuition. Now, let me be clear. Not every time a woman says, you're overreacting, does it mean she's cheating. But when this phrase becomes a pattern, especially when it arises in moments of tension, moments where transparency is needed, it deserves your attention. Because it reveals something even more powerful than infidelity. It reveals a breakdown of trust. Women who are hiding something often become emotionally elusive, not cold necessarily, sometimes even warmer. Kinder, because guilt makes people overcompensate. They give you a little more affection in one hand, while taking away intimacy with the other. They build walls behind their smiles. And then they sprinkle gaslight into the spaces where clarity used to live. The moment you're made to feel crazy for sensing distance, that's the moment you should pause and ask, why is the truth so threatening here? I've worked with couples for over 2 decades. I've sat in rooms filled with tears, with anger, with regret, and sometimes with silent relief. The most painful infidelities are not the ones that surprise us. They are the ones we felt coming, but we silenced ourselves for the sake of peace. But peace without honesty is just avoidance. If she says, you're overreacting, ask yourself, what part of me is reacting? Is it my insecurity? Or is it my wisdom noticing something she doesn't want me to see? And I say this not to create suspicion, but to restore balance, because men are often told to be strong, to stay cool, to not let emotions cloud judgment. But emotional attunement is not weakness, it is power. Men who love deeply, who pay attention, who feel shifts in their partner's energy, those men are not fragile, they are awake. And if something feels off, it's not your job to ignore it, it's your responsibility to explore it with dignity and courage. Let's not jump to conclusions, but let's not lie to ourselves either. When a woman starts leaning into deflection rather than connection, when she starts dodging intimacy by making you the problem, it's time to become curious, not accusatory, but genuinely curious about what has shifted. And curiosity, when rooted in love, is never wrong. So the next time you hear that phrase, "you're overreacting," let it be a moment of reflection, not shame. Ask yourself, what did I feel just before she said that? What was the energy between us? What truth was she trying to bury with those words? Because sometimes cheating isn't in the act, it's in the erosion of honesty, and the phrases that betray us are often whispered long before anything physical ever happens. Now, there's another phrase, one that often hides in plain sight. You've probably heard it 1,000 times and maybe even smiled when she said it, because it sounded harmless, maybe even playful, but beneath it, something else lives. She says it with a shrug, or a half smile, or while glancing at her phone, pretending to be unfazed. You might even laugh when she says it, thinking it's just a passing comment. But it lingers. "He's just a friend." 4 simple words, harmless on the surface, but the devil, as they say, is in the details. Let's pause here for a second. You're sitting together. Maybe she gets a text, and her face lights up in a way you haven't seen in a while. There's a softness to her expression that used to be reserved for you. You ask, casually, curiously, "Who's that?" She replies, "Just a friend, nothing more, no name, no context, no invitation to go deeper." Here's the thing, in a healthy, emotionally honest relationship, your partner doesn't just protect your peace, they invite you into their world. If she were telling you about a new colleague or an old classmate she reconnected with, there would be a natural flow to the conversation. She'd tell you a story, share something that makes you feel closer to her. But "he's just a friend" can be a door slammed gently in your face. It says, "Don't look here." It creates a boundary, but not the kind that nurtures independence. It's the kind that hides things, that draws a line where transparency used to live. Now again, not every friendship with the opposite sex is a threat. Of course not. But it's not about who he is, it's about how she talks about him. Or doesn't. If her tone is defensive, clipped, vague, that's not about friendship, that's about secrecy. Men often feel torn in this moment. You want to trust her. You don't want to be that guy, the insecure, jealous, overprotective one. Society has told you that being suspicious is unattractive, that real men don't ask questions like that. But here's what I want you to understand. Wanting clarity is not weakness. Wanting transparency is not control, it's love. When something feels off, it probably is. And women, when they begin to form emotional connections outside of the relationship, often rationalize them as just friendships, because emotionally it gives them permission. It soothes the conscience. It's not cheating yet, but it's also not innocent, because true friendship doesn't require secrecy. It doesn't live in the shadows. And if she's going out of her way to keep this man compartmentalized, invisible to you, unnamed, that's not friendship. That's a placeholder for something more. Let's go even deeper. There's a moment in many relationships where a woman starts pulling away emotionally before she ever crosses a line physically. She begins sharing her thoughts, her wins, her fears, not with you, but with someone else. Slowly, imperceptibly, the emotional intimacy in your relationship starts to leak. And where does it go? To the man she says is just a friend. She starts laughing at jokes you haven't heard, using phrases that aren't hers, dressing differently on days when she says she's just meeting a colleague. And when you ask about it, you're met with that phrase, short, sharp, and final, "He's just a friend." But here's what I've learned in the therapy room, after sitting with countless couples unraveling infidelity. Cheating doesn't always start with touch. It starts with attention, with emotional connection, with secrets wrapped in smiles. And the phrase, "he's just a friend," is often the first fig leaf women reach for when they know something deeper is stirring inside them, even if they haven't acted on it yet. So what can you do? Don't accuse, don't corner her. That only makes walls go up. Instead, get curious, gently, sincerely. Say something like, "You seem really close to him. I'd love to know more about your friendship." Observe not just what she says, but how she says it. Does she lean in or shut down? Does she speak openly or does she retreat? Because here's what you're listening for. Is she letting you in? Or is she protecting something that doesn't belong in your relationship? Now, there's another phrase. This one is quieter, slipperier. It doesn't sound like a warning. It sounds like self-care. But don't be fooled, because when it arrives unexpectedly, in the middle of conflict or distance, it often carries a deeper meaning. "I just need some space." Now listen to me carefully. Everyone needs space sometimes, healthy space, room to think, to breathe, to reconnect with yourself. But the kind of space I'm talking about here It comes with a chill. You're in the middle of a disagreement, maybe about something small, dirty dishes, weekend plans, who forgot to pick up the dry cleaning, and suddenly she sighs, her voice goes flat, and she says, I just need some space. But you feel the subtext. She's not overwhelmed. She's withdrawing. Her energy isn't grounded. It's floating somewhere else, somewhere you're not invited. And here's where things get complicated, because men, especially those who love deeply, often panic in this moment. You want to fix it. You want to close the distance. You start asking, are you okay? Did I do something wrong? Can we talk about it? But she's already unplugging, not just from the moment, but from the relationship. And I just need some space becomes a shield, a way to say, I don't want to feel accountable for what I'm feeling. I don't want to explain who I've become. I need time, but maybe I also need a way out. This phrase is so difficult because it sounds emotionally mature. It feels like something a self-aware person would say, and in many cases it is. But timing is everything. If she's asking for space right when the relationship feels fragile, when you've been sensing disconnection, when there are unexplained absences or changes in routine, that's not space for clarity. That's space for avoidance. Sometimes space to explore something or someone new. And the worst part, you can't follow her into that space. You don't know what she's doing, who she's texting, who she's thinking about, and that uncertainty eats at you. So how do you respond? With grounded strength, not fear, not possessiveness, but with clarity. You say, I respect that you need space, but I want to be clear about what that means for us. I'm not okay with emotional walls. I want openness. And if there's something more going on, I'd rather know than wonder. That takes courage. That takes self-respect, because men are often told to chase, to prove their worth, to hold the relationship together even when it's breaking in their hands. But sometimes the bravest thing you can do is say, I'm willing to hold space for you, but not if it means erasing myself. Remember, this space in a relationship is healthy when it brings you back together stronger. But when space becomes an excuse for distance, deception, or detachment, it's no longer about growth. It's about escape. And the phrase, I just need some space, often becomes a smokescreen for something far more painful, the desire to disconnect without having to explain why. You deserve clarity, not perfection, not constant closeness, but honesty. When phrases like, he's just a friend, and I just need some space, show up suddenly, repetitively, or defensively, they don't mean your partner is evil, or even intentionally deceitful. But they do mean something in the emotional dynamic has changed. And your job is not to ignore that shift, it's to listen to it. Because silence doesn't always mean peace. And distance doesn't always mean freedom. Sometimes they are early signals of a fracture we're too scared to name. So what happens when the next phrase arrives? Not with distance, but with guilt. What happens when she starts saying something that sounds like she's protecting you, but is actually about protecting herself? Let's stay with this. There's more to uncover. She looks at you softly one evening, maybe after a moment of tension, maybe when you've grown quieter, more watchful. She reaches for your hand or leans her head against your shoulder, and she says it with so much sincerity you almost believe her. You deserve better. Now that one cuts deep, because it sounds kind, doesn't it? Almost noble, almost like love. But beneath the surface, it's carrying something else entirely. I've heard this phrase many times, spoken in therapy rooms, whispered through tears, sent in texts that say goodbye without saying the truth. And almost every time, it is less about the man she's speaking to, and more about the guilt she's carrying inside. You deserve better is the phrase of a woman who's beginning to see herself through your pain. Who knows, maybe not fully, maybe not even consciously, that her actions, her detachment, her secrecy are hurting you. And instead of telling you the truth, she offers this strange kind of gift, a sentence that lets her avoid the harder conversation. But what it really means is I've already started leaving, sometimes emotionally, sometimes physically, sometimes both. It may come after a long period of coldness, or a few nights where you felt her body in bed, but not her soul. Or maybe you confronted her about something you've been quietly observing, calls she takes in another room, a change in passwords, weekends away that used to be girls' trips, and now feel more like rehearsed excuses. You ask gently or firmly, what's going on? And instead of explaining, instead of offering you the truth, she tilts her head and says, you deserve better. This phrase makes you freeze, because it flips the emotional script. Suddenly, you're the one who feels like she's protecting you, like she's sacrificing herself because you're too good for her. But here's the truth most men don't want to face. When someone says, you deserve better, in the middle of disconnection, they're often excusing themselves from accountability. They're cloaking betrayal in a veil of nobility. And it works. Because it hits you where it hurts, in your sense of worth. You start to question everything. You wonder, have I not done enough? Have I loved her too hard? Did I fail her somehow without knowing it? But no, this phrase isn't about your failure. It's about her discomfort with her choices and her unwillingness to bring them into the light. You see, when guilt begins to surface, it looks for a way to escape shame. And rather than say, I've drifted, I've crossed a line, I've developed feelings for someone else, she says, you're too good for me. You're better off without me. And you're left holding a compliment that feels like a curse. You're left trying to decipher whether this is her way of protecting you or letting you down gently. But let me tell you something important. Real love doesn't give up when it gets hard. It doesn't offer vague platitudes in place of truth. It sits down in the mess and says, this is where I am. This is what I'm feeling. Let's figure this out together. So if she says you deserve better, I want you to pause, not to argue, not to beg, but to get still and to ask yourself, what is she not telling me? Because behind that phrase, there's usually a decision she's already made. Maybe not out loud, but in her mind, she stepped out of the relationship. She's testing how much she can say without fully revealing herself. And that's where your strength has to rise. You don't need to yell, you don't need to demand, but you do need to meet that phrase with clarity. Say, if you feel that way, then let's talk honestly. I'm not interested in vague kindness. I want truth. And if she can't give you that, if she stumbles or dodges or changes the subject, then you already know the truth. She's elsewhere. And the phrase, you deserve better, was her way of saying, I've already left. It's a form of pre-closure, emotional detachment dressed in concern. And it leaves you in limbo, wondering whether to fight or to walk away. But what you must remember above all is this: you do deserve better. Not because you're perfect, but because you deserve someone who stands in honesty, someone who meets your questions with answers, not apologies wrapped in pity, someone who doesn't walk away from love while pretending to protect you from it. Now, this next phrase, it's even more slippery because it sounds like openness. It sounds like she's inviting you into her world, but it's a kind of seduction, one that hides misdirection behind apparent transparency. I don't want to hurt you. When a woman says this out of nowhere, when things have been rocky or uncertain, it doesn't always mean she's being thoughtful. Sometimes it means she already has. She looks you in the eyes and says, I don't want to hurt you. But what she really means is, I've done something I know would hurt you if I told you, and I don't want to carry that weight. It often comes right before a breakup or after a heated conversation that veered too close to the truth. Maybe she starts crying, or she gets quiet. Maybe you've been feeling tension all week, and when you finally say, talk to me, she whispers, I don't want to hurt you. It's heartbreaking, because part of you believes she's still trying, that she's choosing kindness. But another part of you senses deeply that this is another diversion, that what she's trying to avoid is not hurting you, but owning what she's done. Because if she really didn't want to hurt you, she wouldn't have crossed the line in the first place. She wouldn't have fed emotional intimacy to another man. She wouldn't have told someone else the things she used to whisper only to you. I don't want to hurt you often arrives at the tail end of betrayal. It's the last leaf falling from a tree that's already gone bare. It sounds gentle, but it's often a shield for silence. And silence in these moments is not protection, it's abandonment. So how do you respond? With grace, but with steel in your spine. Say, if you're afraid of hurting me, then give me the dignity of the truth. Because lies hurt more than honesty ever will. You don't need to scream, you don't need to accuse, but you do need to stand tall in your self-respect. Because this phrase, I don't want to hurt you, can trap you into staying in a relationship that's already emotionally over. It lulls you into hoping she'll change, that if you're just more patient, more loving, more forgiving, she'll come back. But the truth is, if she's already drifted into someone else's arms or heart, then your patience won't bring her back. Only her honesty will. And that's what you must ask for, not to control her, but to honor yourself. These phrases aren't random. They are emotional trail markers, signs that something is shifting in the landscape of your connection. And when you stop brushing them aside, when you start listening not just with your ears, but with your gut, you begin to see clearly. Clarity is painful, but it's the beginning of real power. Let's take this power one step further, because there's still one phrase left, one that might sound harmless, even romantic, but often conceals something far more dangerous: emotional replacement. A phrase that reveals not just what she's hiding, but who she's comparing you to. She says it in passing, casually, as if it's a compliment. You might be in the middle of dinner, or doing something mundane, loading the dishwasher, watching a movie, talking about work, and out of nowhere she smiles faintly and says, why can't you be more like him? Now breathe. This one doesn't sound like a betrayal at first. It sounds like frustration, like a woman comparing you to a friend's husband, or a character in a show, or a colleague, or maybe someone you didn't even know she was paying that much attention to. But listen carefully, not just to the phrase, but to the energy underneath it. Why can't you be more like him? Is not always about what you're not doing. It's often about what someone else is making her feel. It's a phrase soaked in fantasy, in contrast, in dissatisfaction. And it's a symptom of emotional projection. Because what happens when a woman starts developing feelings outside the relationship, but hasn't admitted them even to herself, is that she begins to use other men as emotional yardsticks. She romanticizes the version of them that meets her unmet needs, and she compares them to you, not to build you up, but to distance herself emotionally from the bond you've shared. This phrase isn't just hurtful, it's telling. It tells you that her attention is no longer fully on the relationship, that her desire has started to drift, that someone else, real or imagined, is now the recipient of emotional energy that used to belong to you. Let's take a closer look. Maybe she starts bringing up a coworker more than usual. You know, Alex always remembers to bring coffee for everyone. It's such a thoughtful habit. Or maybe she talks about her best friend's boyfriend. Emma's guy texts her every day just to say he's thinking about her. Isn't that sweet? On the surface, they sound like passing observations, but when they become repetitive, when they're always painting another man in a flattering light, when they're always tied to something you are not doing, then what she's really saying is, I'm comparing the way I feel around you to the way I imagine I'd feel with him. This is the beginning of emotional replacement. She's not just wishing you'd behave differently. She's quietly replacing you in her emotional world with a man who exists exactly as she wants him to, in her mind. Maybe this man is charming, emotionally present, attentive. Maybe he makes her laugh, or listens to her talk about things you haven't asked about in a while. But here's the truth, that man isn't real, not in the way she's describing him. Because she's not seeing his whole self, she's seeing him through the lens of disconnection. When people feel distance in a relationship, they begin to fantasize about connection elsewhere, not necessarily out of malice, sometimes out of grief, sometimes out of boredom, sometimes out of longing. But regardless of the reason, when she says, why can't you be more like him, she is projecting her unmet needs onto someone else and asking you to compete with a fantasy. And the worst part, that fantasy is rarely available to be challenged, because you can't sit down with the other guy and see what their relationship actually looks like. You're just left with a sense of inadequacy, a feeling that no matter what you do, it won't be enough, because she's already seeing you through a distorted lens. So what do? First, don't respond defensively. Don't fire back with comparisons of your own. That only deepens the divide. Instead, get curious. Say something like, it sounds like there's something you're needing from me that you're not getting. Can we talk about it directly? Shift the focus from him to her needs. Because if she's using another man as a mirror, what she's really doing is trying to reflect something back to you. Her loneliness, her hunger for connection, her sense of emotional invisibility. That doesn't excuse it, but it explains it. And sometimes if you lean into that moment, not with shame, not with anger, but with presence, you can break through the wall she's been quietly building. But if she's not willing to meet you there, if she doubles down on comparison, if she begins idealizing this other man, if her energy feels less like longing and more like resentment, then you have to ask a deeper question. Is she still in this relationship emotionally? Or has she already exited and now she's just waiting for an excuse? Because this phrase, why can't you be more like him, is rarely about wanting you to change. It's about justifying her drift. It's about creating a narrative where she's the unfulfilled victim and someone else is the rescuer. And that narrative is dangerous because it opens the door to emotional betrayal long before a physical one ever happens. I've seen it many times. A woman begins comparing, idealizing, criticizing, and before you know it, she's texting someone late at night, meeting for coffee under the guise of friendship, sharing intimate details about her relationship with someone who is more than a listening ear. And you're left feeling like you've been auditioning for a role in a movie you didn't know was being cast. So stop auditioning. Start observing. Start listening to what her phrases really mean. Not just the words, but the patterns, the emotional undertones, the shifts in energy. Because when a woman's heart begins to wander, her language changes. Her gaze lingers elsewhere. Her sentences carry weight she doesn't acknowledge. But your body knows. Your intuition knows. And if you're honest with yourself, you know too. You are not powerless here. You are not lost. You are not broken. You are aware, you are present. And when you stop pretending not to notice what you already feel, you step into a new kind of power. The power to confront, the power to speak, the power to walk away if necessary, but also the power to ask for honesty, not from a place of fear, but from a place of self-respect. Because at the end of the day, no one can truly love you while lying to you. No one can nurture trust while planting seeds of doubt. And no matter how softly she speaks, no matter how gently she wraps her phrases in charm or kindness or concern, your soul deserves truth. So if you've heard any of these phrases, you're overreacting. He's just a friend. I just need some space. You deserve better. Why can't you be more like him? Not once, but repeatedly. Don't brush them off. They are not just sentences. They are signposts. And you, my friend, are standing at a crossroads. So here you are, sitting with the weight of these phrases. Maybe you've heard one. Maybe you've heard them all. Maybe something inside you is finally clicking, not in panic, but in understanding. Like you've been walking through fog and suddenly the outlines of something real start to appear. Let's take a breath together, because this isn't about blaming women. It's not about demonizing softness or condemning the ways people disconnect when they don't have the words to ask for what they need. This conversation isn't about anger. It's about awareness. Awareness of the space between what's said and what's meant. The words that sound like love but are spoken from fear. The phrases that promise peace but carry secrets. The quiet ways a relationship begins to unravel, not with screaming, but with subtle redefinition. When she says, "You're overreacting," she's not always trying to hurt you. Sometimes, she's trying to manage her own guilt, or dodge the discomfort of being seen too clearly. When she says, "He's just a friend," she may genuinely believe it at first, until she finds herself confiding in him, laughing more easily with him, hiding things from you, and telling herself it's harmless. But intimacy has many forms, and some of the deepest betrayals begin emotionally. When she says, "I just need some space," she might mean she's overwhelmed, or she might mean she's found somewhere else that feels easier to breathe. And when she does, it's not the space itself that wounds, it's what's done in that space without accountability. When she whispers, "You deserve better," it can sound like love, but it often hides emotional exit, a way of stepping away from commitment without ever turning around to look you in the eye. And when she asks, "Why can't you be more like him?" what she's really doing is telling you that someone else is fulfilling a role in her mind that you used to hold. That emotional fantasy, that imagined replacement, is her way of escaping without leaving the room. But here's the most important thing I can tell you. These phrases, these emotional shifts, they don't mean you are unlovable. They don't mean you failed. They don't mean you are weak. They mean something has changed. And that change deserves your attention, not your denial. Men are taught to fight, to endure, to fix relationships with action and logic. But emotional betrayal is not a problem to solve. It's a reality to feel, to hold with honesty, to look at and say, "This is happening. I see it. I feel it. Now what am I going to do with this truth?" Because the truth, as painful as it may be, is always the beginning of something sacred. And if you're watching this because you feel that shift, if your gut has been whispering that something's off, and now these words have confirmed what you were afraid to face, then know this: you are not alone. You are not foolish for loving deeply. You are not weak for wanting to hold on. But strength isn't always holding on. Sometimes, strength is knowing when to stop chasing a version of love that no longer looks back at you with the same eyes. If the woman you love is showing you, through her words, her silences, her comparisons, her emotional disappearances, that she is no longer all the way here, you owe it to yourself to stop pretending. Pretending that it's fine. Pretending that you're imagining it. Pretending that if you just wait long enough, things will go back to how they were. But you're not who you were. You've grown. You're seeing more clearly. You're asking harder questions. And that's not the end of love. That's the beginning of truth. And truth, my friend, is where healing starts. It starts when you stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and start asking, "What do I need to feel respected, loved, seen?" It starts when you stop obsessing over whether she's cheating and begin reflecting on whether this relationship honors who you are today. Because that's the shift. That's the alchemy. You go from searching her phone to searching your soul, from investigating her patterns to rediscovering your worth. You stop asking if she's hiding something and start declaring what you will no longer hide from: your needs, your boundaries, your non-negotiables. And maybe, just maybe, this isn't the end of the relationship. Maybe it's the beginning of a new kind of conversation, one where you bring your truth fully to the table and you invite her to do the same. But if she can't, if she won't, if she turns away again and again behind these same familiar phrases, then it may be time to honor yourself by letting go. Because real love, the kind that lasts, that grows, that breathes with you through life's storms, it does not hide behind false sentences. It speaks in courage. It answers hard questions. It shows up again and again. You deserve a love like that. You don't have to settle for coded words and emotional withdrawal. You are not here to be someone's backup plan. You are not here to be emotionally benched while someone else takes the field. You are here to be chosen, fully, clearly, without games. So if you've heard these 5 phrases and you feel that quiet ache of recognition, I want you to do one thing today, just one. Honor what you feel. Don't push it away. Don't numb it. Don't drown in distraction or pride. Sit with it, name it, and then ask yourself, what do I want now? Not what do I fear? Not what am I losing? But what do I truly want? Because once you ask that question, you've already started the journey back to yourself. You don't have to beg for clarity. You are the clarity. You don't have to demand honesty. You are the honesty. And no matter what happens next, you can walk away with your dignity intact. So if this video spoke to something in you, some memory, some ache, some intuition you've been ignoring, then please leave a comment. Share your story. You're not alone. And if you found value here, if you want more conversations about truth, intimacy, healing, and emotional intelligence in relationships, subscribe to this channel. Like the video. Pass it on to a friend who needs it. Because these aren't just hidden phrases women say when they're cheating. These are the quiet tremors of disconnection. And the sooner we learn to feel them, name them and face them, the sooner we can return to love that is true. Here's to your clarity, your strength, your healing, and here's to never accepting half-truths in place of whole love again. Until next time, take care of your heart.